Hello everyone, how are you doing? This is M.L.S. Weech and this is the weekly book cover of the month video. As you guys may know by now, every week I take a look at the new books on Amazon and I go as far as I can looking for covers that I think stand out, and then I talk about why they're interesting and maybe a few things that aren't so great about it, and then I let you guys vote on your favorite in the bracket. So you can vote for this week's down below in this bracket. And I want to introduce myself to those who are new to the channel. I am M.L.S. Weech. I am your friendly neighborhood self-published author. If you are interested in supporting me, please be kind enough to click the subscribe and notification bell. And if you're really trying to be nice, head on over to my Amazon page in the link below. Check out some of my books and see if any of them interest you. So before we talk about the books for this week, I want to talk about I want to announce the winner of the third week of April book cover of the week. And that book cover is actually The City of Time and Magic by Paula Braxton. I was a huge fan of this cover when it came out. I'm super excited that it won. I want to offer my congratulations to the designer. This one will join the others in the book cover of the month competition that I'm going to do once we wrap out the covers for April, which will actually be next week. We'll announce the winner for that one. For now, though, we have 7 new covers to look at, and we want to get started. This is actually the first week of May is what we're looking at here. So the results from the previous weeks are a little bit behind, which gives me time to narrow down book covers and get the brackets done and that kind of stuff. But enough of that. The first cover we're going to talk about for this week is a book called Vicarius. That's the name of this book. Vicarius is by Rhett C. Bruno, whose books I've seen out and around for a while. The first thing that stood out to me was the color of this particular cover. It's got a lot of colors going on for it, and normally in a book cover, that's not the best idea. You don't typically want to have so many vibrant colors, but when you weave them together so well, it works. So sometimes you can do something that isn't normally done, and it works out for you. The next thing I noticed that I really appreciated is I really think that the composition of this is just very, very strong. You have the moon in this element and this little flying whatever it is traveling across the screen. The title text is nice. I like the little effect and layering that you have with the motion lines around it. Then you have this element, and then you have this other person here. So all of these things, what I want you to note about it, and I talk to the students I teach, when we're doing photography, composition is really about making sure all the elements in a frame are where you want those elements. And it's even better when those elements have their own space. You really don't want things crowding one another. So you got layering, and that's good because it gives you depth, but you don't want to layer by putting elements you want each person to the eyes to rest on. So you want them to see the moon, you want them to see this flying object, you want them to see the screen, and you want to see this figure, and all of these elements combine very well. Now, the area where it's not the best is this cover is one where it's kind of easy to glance away from. You got this flying object flying off the frame, so your eye can leave there. The moon is right in the corner, so the eye can move there. The text seems to move the eye across. The elements don't really keep the eye there, but that's not like the worst thing in the world. It just means that there are some people who would scan right by this book cover and never really notice it because the visual elements don't force you to stay on the design. The next cover we want to go over is Only the Buried by Amanda M. Lee. We're going to bring this cover up right here. Only the Buried is a Deathgate Grim Reaper's thriller. I've seen a lot of her work because my book, The Journals of Bob Drifter, kind of falls in the same Grim Reaper kind of area. I haven't had the opportunity to try any of her work. What I like about this cover, honestly, is just the sheer detail in this. I'm not sure if it's a enhanced photo. I'm not sure if it's a rendered product. However this was generated, the detail in all of this is just amazing. I'm not the biggest fan of the light. And what that means is the light source, you can tell by the brim of the hat, is kind of coming from up above the subject. Uh, but there's not a lot of definition in the face. So while the detail in itself is great, these blacks, or at least on my monitor, it might look different on yours. Monitors have a lot of, depends on how long some people calibrate their monitors and some don't. But these blacks fall away pretty quick. So this beautiful detail, but the light doesn't really help it be as powerful as it could. Even if they only brought up the exposure or the brightness of that face by just a touch. I know you're going for this dark, you know, uh, uh, um, aesthetic, but it's okay to have a brighter part in a darker scene. And if the separation from the blacks to this face was even just 1 degree brighter, it would hold the eye a lot more quickly. The font is wonderful, and I know that this is a font that they carry over through all of the titles in this series. So it really deserves a lot of notice, and I'm glad there was a new book to talk about in that regard. The next book we're going to talk about is Hover by Mark Wayne McGinnis. And that's this guy right here. So this has great light, great color. It's got a nice aesthetic feel. It feels like one of those, dystopian, futuristic kind of workman-like settings. I think I like this rendered vehicle. So the light and the vehicle and the detail are pretty good. I'm not a fan of the text. I'm not a fan of the title text. I feel like it's just kind of slapped on there. I think that's one of the worst things whenever I'm looking at book covers. You have this tremendous work of art, and then you just kind of slap a title on it, and it doesn't feel like a lot of thought was put into how the title text would work with the actual cover. And then you got the author text down below. Now, to give the designer some credit, they may have been doing this thing called sampling, where they took some of this yellow gold and applied it there, which makes a kind of sense. But it's down on this black background for the contrast, so it's legible. But then it draws the eye down, and it kind of competes with everything. But you have this light, this aesthetic scene in this really cool rendered vehicle, and you got to give it some kind of credit. And that's what I wanted to do. Next one we're going to talk about is Emergency Shift, which is a book by Daniel R. Potter, not to be confused with the famous wizard. So essentially, this is just a portrait cover, and the portrait's well done. It's well rendered. I think the figure here leaves a little bit to be desired. The work in that particular area feels like some more love could have been placed there. The main figure, the woman carrying this anamorph, or whatever you want to call it, is well rendered. The proportions are a little better. The gun looks cool. I also want to give props to the layering effect. So in the last cover, I talked about how text that feels slapped on is really bad. Well, even when a cover isn't like the greatest thing, if the text is a part of the design, it's still a more pleasing artistic rendering. So you got the firearm clearly layered in front of the title text, and you have the figure clearly behind, and layering gives depth to a story. So when they're doing those things, it just adds a degree that's really pleasing. The light isn't there. The light isn't bad. It's not fantastic, but it's not bad. And the landscape's kind of spooky, kind of interesting. This weird chain link fence thing is, I don't know if I look in closer, maybe it's supposed to feel like we're looking through the fence. So maybe this cover isn't the strongest out of the series. Maybe it is. Maybe it's your favorite. You should vote for it in the link down below. But whatever you're doing, what I'm talking about in this particular cover is just that there are some nice things going on about it, but there are some things that really kind of feel weird, particularly this figure there. I get it. It's a paranormal creature, a fantasy creature, a weird creature of some kind, whatever term you want to use. But this looked kind of like someone took my face and photoshopped it on like where a toddler should be, and it feels a little hokey. Overall, not bad. Just maybe not the greatest in my personal opinion. Still good enough for me to put on the bracket. So I mean, I'm trying to give it some credit. The next book we want to talk about is Dragon's Gate by Lindsay Buroker. And I love this landscape. Landscapes are typically done in fantasy, and they're typically all about light and composition and how things work. But you have this really interesting sci-fi fantasy landscape. You have this deep background. You have this weird pyramidal platform up in the upper right corner, all revolving around this giant Stargate looking kind of device, and then these silhouettes. Now, earlier I talked about you like things to have their own space, right? Well, you do. So this guy being in the way of this other guy in the far background, it's not my favorite thing. Now we can get around it. The sword isn't going through his neck. It's not going through any unfortunate areas of the human body. But you know, this figure could have been arranged a little bit more. But if you don't have something layering, then it's harder to see who's closer to the viewer and who's closer to that Stargate looking device or portal. So on one hand, it's not the best way to use layering, but I can completely understand why they have to do that to have some effect, some sense of depth. And they also use scale. So you have this huge thing right here, and then that gives you some kind of reference. And when you have a person, you can tell that this is very big because people people have a good idea on the average height of a person. We don't really know how big these creatures here are, but they have to be quite large if they're that far away, and they're still comparable in size to the humans. How much bigger is up to debate, but that scale also gives a sense of depth. So that's Dragon's Gate by Lindsay Buroker. I do like the text. I like the little lens flare at the A. It's not it might be overdone for some people, but it's a nice little touch. It's a nice little flourish. So good work on that cover. We got two more to look at. So the next one we're going to look at is the Sunfire King. And I got to be honest with you. I'm bringing it up now, and I looked at it for a second. I go, oh, I love this. And then I looked at it for another second. I thought, I kind of hate it. And then I looked at it again. I'm like, no, I love it. And every time I look at it, I have the complete opposite feeling of what I had for it before. When I first saw it, I saw this beautiful, what's the term I'm looking for? Victorian era sort of feel and aesthetic with the detail and the art and the figures and that great color. And I'm like, oh, this is so great. And then I look at it again, I go, wow, it's so busy. It's the tree, the frame that's created by the branches are really a little too close to the two central figures. I'm not sure why they're looking at the camera or while they're looking at the viewer. The light doesn't feel like it's the best. It's not bad. It doesn't look bad. Light makes things tend to feel flat or photoshopped, like on there. If you've ever taken a picture of yourself like at Hawaii, only you've never been to Hawaii, it'll have that same flatness to it. Shadow is what creates the depth and makes things look more real. And while I have some shadow, the light, for some reason, I'm sure if I studied it for a while, I'd know what really bothers me about it. But there is something not great about the light in that particular image. The title tag kind of competes with the whole aesthetic. So all the individual parts of this cover are stunning. And then when you put them all together, it's a little overwhelming. And I think I think other people, if you're looking on it, you can let me know in the comments below. Is it too much or is it awesome? What do you think? I don't think I gave you all the credit. This is by Sylvia Mercedes. So right now I'm looking at it, I go, yeah, I really do like it. And, you know, I look at the camera for a second and then I look back, I go, it's just so busy. So I really feel of two minds about it. And it's still worthy of looking at. And whenever you're an author, you really want someone's eyes to linger on the actual camera. or on the actual product, and that's what's going to hold their attention. Last cover we're going to look at for the day is Possessed by C.N. Crawford. I've seen C.N. Crawford's work here and there. I'm relatively familiar with it. The image sizes I take from Amazon can vary based on who uploads what. So I've made this as large as I can. Ultimately, I love the detail. Traditionally, putting figures in front of a bright light is not the greatest idea. Even here, it kind of bugs me a little bit. But when you contrast it with the genre and the feel that you want, while I still don't necessarily think it's like the best thing, I can absolutely understand why it was done. So this light's going to draw the eye. That's going to bring you right to this figure. You're going to see these beautiful leaves. And I honestly love the detail of everything. I love the detail of the dress. I love the way the model was rendered. I love the detail in the wings. They might be a little on the hokkier side. Winged individuals and winged creatures are always a challenge, I think, because you want the wings to look big enough to sustain the individual as they're flying, but given the actual dimensions you would need in order to fly as a human, it's actually kind of ridiculous. So you always have to kind of balance that. These wings feel a tad small for me, but they don't feel ridiculously small either. So the last thing about this, the title text is okay. The last image, I like that one lens, that one little light filigree on the A, but having 1, 2, arguably 3, even 4 highlights on one title text really just kind of demands a lot out of the eye. And it's a little overpowering for the rest of the design. But the color of the dress is great, and the detail in the shadow and in the folds of the dress are equally commendable. So those are the covers we're looking at for the week. I want to ask, please, again, once more, consider going down there and voting for your favorite. We had 10 votes for the winner we announced today, and so we're growing. I remember when I stopped doing this a couple years ago, we were up into thousands of votes, and I'd like to get back there. And I'm hoping that as more and more people come, more and more word gets out. And the more votes that happen, the more legitimate it is. And I don't, particularly get anything. It's just a matter of giving authors and artists credit and having a fun conversation and interaction about book covers. So I hope you consider doing that. I hope you had some fun. We'll see you in the next video. Thank you, and God be with you.